Hello, this is Cho of the Shiny Colors Discord, and welcome to another episode of the Shiny Review. Today we have 3 new cards that we need to talk about: the new Limited Produce SSR for Chiyuki, Limited Support SSR for Hiyori, and the Event Support SSR for Tenka. First we have Chiyuki. Next on the list of the P-SSR5 series is Chiyuki, who wants us to return our attention to visual Alstroemeria. Simply put, Chiyuki's design is incredibly straightforward. She stylizes herself after many previous Alstroemeria cards, particularly Amana, and prioritizes staying at high HP values with stamina scaling appeals and some added visual buffing to boot. She has a fantastic memory appeal, and really no downside to being used at all. The biggest issue one can find with this Chiyuki is the fact that she really only works in visual Alstroemeria. Much of her utility only makes sense in this particular setup, as there isn't a whole lot she can offer to other Alstroemeria setups. That being said, while she may seem a little boring, she's absolutely a huge piece to visual Alstroemeria, so if you had Tenka 4 and Amana 4, you have one final piece of the puzzle to collect. Her roles are Buffer, Stamina, Nuker, and Center, and I am somewhere between moderately to highly recommending that you pull for this Chiyuki. If you are an Alstroemeria producer, do not miss out on this card. If you're not really much of an Alstroemeria player, you are probably safe to skip it. Chiyuki's initial appeal is a visual 0.7 to 3.5 that scales based on how high your mental is, and also applies a 30% visual buff for 5 turns. This then links into a visual 80% buff for 4 turns. At max, she unlocks a visual 1.1 to 5.5 appeal that scales based on how high your mental is, and applies a 50% visual buff for 5 turns, and links into the same visual 80% buff for 4 turns. Chiyuki's 1-star passive is a visual 50% up that requires Chiyuki on your team. This has a 30% chance to activate once. Her 2-star passive is a staggering visual 90% up and mental 10% heal as long as the turn count is 2 or later. This has a 30% chance to activate 3 times, and also unlocks an additional plus 50 visual uncap. At 3 stars, she gains a visual plus 150 and a visual plus 50 uncap. And she also has a 4-star passive, a visual 75% up that requires the turn count to be 3 or later. This has a 30% chance to activate 3 times. Her memory appeal, once maxed out, is a visual 100% up for 2 turns that links into a visual max 4.0 appeal, which scales based on how high your mental is. For support recommendations, Tenka and Amana are very clear choices for supports, but more SP masteries will always be useful when it comes to building Alstroemeria, so always consider supports like Yuika or Fuyuko as you build your team. For the alternatives, honestly, anything that doesn't raise your attention works. Just pick all your best visual options, pick your strongest passives, and let that attack cut through everything with no remorse. As for team recommendations, this is the ultimate visual Alstroemeria: Amana 4, Tenka 4, Chiyuki 5. Chiyuki 5 as a center guarantees a metric ton of damage as long as you remember to prime your memory appeal with at least one of your Chiyuki link appeals. You deal absurd amounts of damage and heal forever. Honestly, the real power of this particular setup now is that you can be incredibly freeform with your support selection. Almost any visual units that you can select will have some sort of application with Alstroemeria, as they can operate very independently of your splash supports. Naturally, any buffer-style unit will work well, so your Rinzes, your Chokos, but you might even include units like Osaki 2 for more AoE visual damage. Offense, defense, somewhere in between, it will most likely work. Chiyuki as a center receives an S+ to a SS. This memory appeal is the exact type of appeal that will put in a ton of work right now. Thanks to the 100% visual buff on top of a 4.0 appeal, it ends up outmatching Amana 4's memory appeal on the original setup. You really can't go wrong with Chiyuki 5 as your center of choice with Alstroemeria. As a unit, she actually gets anywhere from a B+ to a SS, and I think this one's a little more apparent. The ultimate factor is whether or not you have the other 2 limited visual Alstroemeria cards. Without those 2, this Chiyuki feels vaguely underwhelming, as all she does is really hit hard, and her healing factor is significantly weaker than most other Chiyukis. So you might find it harder to stay at high mental to make the most of her damage. Now, on the Alstroemeria team, however, she becomes a whole other beast. She has insane damage output, fantastic passives, and she's a must-have for aspiring Alstroemeria producers. Next we have Hiyori. Hiyori's second limited support SSR. A dance visual split focus, but a dance visual split card with more of a focus on dance. Her masteries are a little all over the place, but in a fantastic way for Illumination Stars. The main thing that sets this Hiyori apart from the previous Illumination Stars Limiteds is the fact that she's not as good on other teams. There's a lot more emphasis on unit mastery for her, but there's other reasons why you could run her on other teams. She's a pretty good design direction, I believe. Her support skills are Idol's Bond, Promise Recovery, and Rest Boost, and her unique support skills are Dance Mastery Dance and Dance Mastery Visual, which both reach plus 10 at level 65, Unit Mastery SP, which reaches plus 6 at level 70, and Unit Mastery Stamina, which is unlocked at level 75. She has a scaling support appeal that is a Dance 3.0 all the way through, but gains a scaling Dance and Visual buff starting at 5% at level 60 and 25% at level 80, and all these buffs last for 3 turns. Her TFD idea is Mental, and her Insight token for Grad is Visual. Hiyori's 1-star passive is a Dance 40% up and Visual 20% up that requires Hiyori on your team. This has a 10% chance to activate 3 times. Her 2-star passive is a Dance 60% up and Visual 30% up that requires the turn count to be 3 or later. This has a 10% chance to activate 3 times. Her 3-star Uncap is a combined Dance Visual plus 70, and her 4-star Appeal is a Dance 3.0 and Visual 1.5 that applies a 30% Dance Visual buff for 3 turns. And Hiyori's event passive is a Dance 30% up and Visual 10% up that requires Hiyori on your team and has a 20% chance to activate twice. Hiyori earns anywhere from an A- to a SS. Much like Chiyuki, I think it does depend on what type of team you run her on. Hiyori is a bit of an interesting case. While I think she is incredibly good for Illumination Stars, hence the SS, she's not quite as powerful on other teams for the time being. Having a higher focus on unit mastery for stamina and SP means that other cards get to play bigger roles in those cases. So I'd roll if you can as Illumination Stars players, but I would think carefully if you focus on other units instead. So she's anywhere from a low to high recommendation solely based off of what type of team you choose to run. If you are an Illumination Stars producer, you absolutely want this Hiyori, and if you're not, weigh the odds just a little bit. Maybe you prefer the double mastery in one room, and don't mind missing out on SP and stamina. Lastly, we have the event card Tenka. Tenka's latest event SSR is an attempt to create a more usable freebie card. Having access to a reasonable amount of SP in the Vocal Room, Tenka can act as a good buffer point for players looking to start building for Fess, but lack the SP masteries of gacha cards. Some parts of this card make 0 sense, but she comes out overall as an okay support. Her support skills are Idol's Bond, Promise Recovery, Rest Boost, and Stamina support, and her unique support skill is Vocal Mastery SP, reaching plus 6 at level 75. Her support appeal does scale starting at a Vocal 2.5 and working its way up to a Vocal 3.0 once you hit level 80. Her TFD idea is Vocal, and her Insight token for Grad is Visual. Tenka's 1-star passive is a Vocal 18% up that requires an active Relax buff, otherwise recognized as a Regen buff. This has a 30% chance to activate once. Her 2-star passive is a Vocal 35% up that requires the turn count to be 4 or earlier. This has a 30% chance to activate once. Her 3-star Uncap is a plus 50 to Vocal, and her 4-star Appeal is a Visual 2.8 that applies a mental 5% heal for 3 turns. This is where you can activate your 1-star passive, as this is a Relax-based buff. Tenka's event passive is a Vocal 20% up that requires Tenka on your team and has a 40% chance to activate twice. Tenka earns a B-. She has a not terrible 2-star passive, a solid event passive, and a pretty decent support skill. The only thing I don't understand is why this card has a Visual 2.8 appeal once maxed out. Is it so that she can be ran alongside the new Chiyuki? And why 2.8? I don't know. This card is generally fine, and there's not a ton to complain about other than the systemic event card woes, so get those copies while you can. I recommend farming for this Tenka if you have the time. And that's going to do it for the video today. Thank you so much as always for watching. Next time we'll be talking about whatever banner comes next, and good luck if you choose to pull on the banner. I've been Sho, thanks for watching, and have a wonderful rest of your day.